So the book I'm using for this reading reflection is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. It's about a boy who is chosen for battle school. They are in a situation where they have interstellar space flight, and they've had aliens attack the Earth and almost destroy the species. And so they've got these kids in battle school. They're training them so that they can keep the country or keep the world safe, actually. Ender he's recognized as a military genius from a very young age. He wins all the games. And he's a really little kid when he starts his battle training. He's probably, I want to say they recognize that he's a good candidate for battle school when he's probably about, maybe 5 or 6, maybe 7. He's really just a little kid. His brother and sister had also been recognized as geniuses that could join the battle school, but Peter, they rejected him when he got older because he had some tendencies that they didn't want at the battle school. And then his sister, they also rejected her. She was kind of the other side. She was probably a little bit she's super smart, but maybe had too much empathy. She was too soft. At any rate, so that's what this book is basically about, Ender at the battle school. A text-to-text connection I would make with this. This reminds me a lot of other science fiction books that I have read. One of those would be House of the Scorpions. And it's not like super alike Ender's Game because it's not about space, but it is about advances in technology. That one is about a kid who he's a clone, or he's chosen for parts or something like that. It's been a long time since I've read it. But he's chosen because he has to grow organs basically for other people on Earth. And that's a technology that they are using at that point in time. So that kind of reminds me of that, just because it's little kids in situations that are way bigger than them, and they're expected to deal with them even though they're children. Okay. A text-to-world connection. Text-to-world connection. I guess it reminds me of what's going on with child soldiers in other locations, and maybe even a little bit about the history of the United States with child soldiers. Because in places like the Sudan, in places with like even ISIS, they recruit little super young kids. Part of the reason for recruiting the young kids is because they can teach them, they can basically brainwash them, and they can teach them to fight and to know no other life, and to have a loyalty to the group because they don't have any other connections. And so it's kind of the same way. In Enders, they're trying to get kids young so that they can train them from the ground up. It also, if you really wanted to look back into the U.S.'s history too, back in the old days when we were going through things like our civil wars and whatnot, a lot of kids did participate in those as well. Not necessarily for the same types of reasons, not recruited individually, but as members of families that were fighting for, they basically felt like they were fighting for their communities and for their lives. And so maybe it reminds me a little bit of that as well. I think maybe a theme for this book, seems to have a lot to do with the question of, to what extent should we go to in order to protect ourselves? What's the cost of humanity if we have to protect ourselves by recruiting children so young? And Ender goes through a lot of dilemmas in the course of his training. It kind of has to do with his nature as a human and his empathy for other people, and they're kind of trying to train that out of him. So the theme it really kind of has to do with the human nature and what is ethical when it comes to trying to use another person to your ends. And then finally, did I enjoy the book? Yeah, I love this book. In fact, this is my second time reading it. I love the complex ideas that they have, and also the action. It's just very well written, because they have the generals and things like that in addition to the young kids. So it's a super cool book. I would recommend that a friend read it. And in fact, I would recommend in a very big way that a friend read it rather than watch the movie. Like, the movie was pretty good if you'd never read the book. If you've read the book, though, the movie is just like, wow, it leaves out a huge amount of stuff. It leaves out a couple of the main and most interesting characters, Valentine and Peter. They don't appear a lot in the movie, and they're really a huge part of the book and the themes that we learn about. So definitely don't watch the movie. Read the book first, or if you've seen the movie, kind of come at this from an open mind, because there are so many more layers to this book, and it's so much more interesting than the movie. And that is my book. Thanks for listening.